right? Have you gone through disappointments in your life? I don't think that there is a person who has not been disappointed in one or another way. Well, Christianity has moved forward thanks to disappointments, right? And the Bible is full of those disappointments that we can find out about it. We can find, but the main disappointed person, who do you think it is? I think God, Jesus, dealing with us for how long? 6,000 years, you know. But disappointments is a blessing if we see it in this way, because when things don't come out the way that we want it, what happened? Our faith tells us God is planning to do something better with it, right? So sometimes disappointment is a tool that God used for us to grow, to move to the next step. And the only way is creating disappointments. And we talk about different disappointments in our presentations. We don't need to repeat it. But there was one big one that it happens when? That was around the 1800s. And this disappointment was because not only one person, that many people think, is not only William Miller, but there was different people all over the world. We mentioned Joseph Wolf. We mentioned one of the Jesuit priests in Chile. Forgot his name. And there was another one in England, another one in Switzerland, there was another one in Africa. There was a different people at different times around early 1800s where they brought this truth about what? The second coming of Jesus. And the second coming of Jesus was discovered at that time because people was studying prophecy. Something was unlocked around those years. Do you know what was unlocked around those years? It was unlocked the book of Daniel. All these different people, all of a sudden, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, they started studying prophecy. Even around the same time that William Miller started. And they discovered something is going to happen around 1840. You know, did it happen? It didn't happen. But allow a group of people to continue praying and move to the next step. But after that, the truth of the second coming became a reality. Right now, all the Christian churches, if you don't believe in the second coming of Jesus, well, I think Bible needs to be studied again, right? But at that time, in the 1800s, remember, people was disfellowship just for speaking those things. People was killed for those truths. People was thrown in jail because they were speaking about the second coming. So this is a reality. But this disappointment has, I think there is one big disappointment that we don't want it to happen. And let's open our Bibles and open in the book of Luke. Luke chapter 13. In Luke chapter 13, this is the big disappointment that I think the Bible speaks, but many people don't get it. And it's in Luke 13, chapter 28. Look at what it said. There shall be what? Weeping and gnashing of teeth, when you shall see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, and you yourself, what? Thrust out. Don't you think that's a big disappointment? And let me tell you, that's going to be a big disappointment for many Christians. And we try to avoid that. But the one that, in order for us to be prepared for that, we need to understand how disappointments works. And let's go and do a quick review. Let's start with Revelation chapter 10. As we study those things, as we study this group of chapters, going to show you why many people become Adventists. I count myself as one of them. But let's look in chapter 10 of Revelations. Look at what it said here. In Revelation chapter 10, verse 1 said, And I saw another mighty angel came down from heaven, clothed with a cloud and rainbow was upon his head, and his face was were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And look at what it says, verse 2. And he had in his hand what? A little book. And he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot upon the air. When you see an angel, one foot on the air, the other one on the sea, what is telling us? It's a worldwide message. And it's talking about what? A little book. And this angel, and let's move a few Bible verses after. Look at what he said in verse 8. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me and said, Go and take the little book, which is open in the hand of the angel, which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it, and it shall make it very sweet, but it shall be in thy mouth what? Sweet as honey. And I took the little book of the angel's hand and ate it. And it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten, my belly was bitter. So, that Bible verse symbolically tells us about what? A disappointment, right? And it's talk about disappointment because the little book was open. Who pointed to this little book in the Gospels? This little book is pointed in the Bible by Jesus himself. If you just go to look to Matthew 24, look at what he said. Matthew 24, we all know that is the chapter about the end of the world. Is that right? Yes, and we can see it here, how important plays the role of Daniel in these last time events. And let's see Matthew 24. Let's go and read verses 11. And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And look at what he said here. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached into all the world for a witness unto all nations. And what he said then? And then shall the end come. But look at what he said the next Bible verse. He said in verse 15, When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whose readeth, let him what? Understand. Jesus himself pointed out as an important event the end of the world associated to what? To the book of Daniel. And he points to this power that is going to create what? Desolation. Means destruction. And when he said abomination, means that it's going to be something religious. Right? If a evil man rise upon and start creating destruction, would you call it abomination? No, because it's a man not associated with religion. But when somebody in the name of God start using wrong principles and destroying, that's called abomination. And this is what is pointing here. So let's go back to the book of Revelation because it's important for us to understand this summary. Why we know that this message is important? Because the important part of this disappointment, as John depictures here in Revelation 10, is what it comes on the next verse, the last one on Revelation 10. Look at what he said here. Here is talking that somebody opened the book of Daniel, okay? They thought that something was going to happen, but it didn't happen. And look at what he said in verse 11. And he said unto me, what? Thou must prophesy again before many people and nations and tongues and kings. Do we see here that this new prophecy needs to be given worldwide? Yes. And he said here we need to prophesy again. It means what? It means you've been studying prophecy, but something was misunderstood. So you need to prophesy again. Prophecy is right. Our understanding can be wrong. And it needs to be done again. It needs to be done again. And you know, many people call this is like the birth certificate of what? Seventh-day Adventist Church, because that was the root of it. But let's keep moving. Let's see. The other important thing to understand why we are on the last days is because chapter 10, what is before chapter 10? Let's go chapter 9. The trumpets. Which one? Okay, let's go. In Revelation chapter 9. Let's read verse 13. What is said here? And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 hours of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for the slay of third part of the men. So look at, this is the 6th trumpet. And the important thing is what it comes after that. Let's move to the next, after 10. Let's go to chapter 11. Let's go to verse 15. What do you see in Revelation chapter 11 after the new church that is going to prophesy? In verse 15, chapter 11, said, and the 7 angels sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying what? The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of our Christ, and he shall reign what? Forever and ever. So the 7th trumpet points to what? To the coming of Jesus. His kingdom is going to start forever and ever. And before the 7th trumpet is the 6th trumpet, right? And the 6th trumpet we read in chapter 9. Look at what it said here. Go back to chapter 9. There is going to be, this is the 6th trumpet. Look at what he said in verses 20. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils. What we see here, these people is worshiping what? Devils. And they here said, should not worship devils, idols of gold, and silver, and brass, and stone, of good, which neither can see, nor hear, nor walk. Verse 21. Neither repented they of their murders, of their sorceries, nor fornications, of their thefts. So, trumpet number 6 is giving, okay, this warning, and then it comes Revelation 10 about God raising what? A new church. This last church that is being raising is which one? Seventh-day Adventist. And after that, what it comes? Trumpet number 7. That is what? The second coming of Jesus. You can see by yourself. Are we very close to the end of probation? We can see that it's very close. But this is not enough. Let's move. We are trying to summarize something here to understand the times that we are living. Let's move to chapter 12 of Revelation. In summary, Revelation chapter 12, let's call him, is the history of the Christian church. And let's start with the first verses. In Revelation chapter 12, and then appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of the 12 stars. And she being what? With child cried, traveling in birth, and pained to be delivered. And let's see, continue what he said. And then appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. So here we see the born of the Christian church. That's where Jesus was about to be born. But then comes into the picture who? The dragon, right? This dragon comes in the picture, and look at, we know by verse 9, in same Revelation 12, what it tells us. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called what? The devil and Satan. And this is what happened here. We see that this is the beginning of what? This is the beginning of this great controversy that we've been talking about. Because we read a few verses after that, because we are trying to do the summary here. Look at what it said, verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the air, he persecuted whom? The woman, which brought forth the man child. So we see here this great controversy. We see the Satan, the dragon, who is persecuting whom? The church. And which type of church? The Christian church, the one who followed Jesus. But it's not only that, because here later on is going to give us more details. Let's read what is said in verse 17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war. Here is very clear, right? with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So do we see here the wrath of Satan? Against whom? Against the church, right? And which church? Is any Christian church? Here is called the remnant of the seed. So that's what is very important for us to know where we are. And this church that the dragon has the wrath against is this last truth that is being given to the world. And here is given the description that this church needs to have this feature. Which ones? Keep the commandments of God. And what else? Testimony of Jesus Christ. So we cannot separate those things. But this is basically, you can see here, you can see in chapter 12 how this great controversy started. Many people said, oh, this book, the great controversy that you guys are passing, is just something of a person who had some visions. No, the great controversy is in the Bible. You can see it. In chapter 12, it shows these great controversies between the war against what? The dragon in any Christian church. No, it's not any Christian church. It's just this church that is what? The remnant of the seed. The ones who keeps the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. But let's keep moving because God keeps extending and giving more details. What it comes in Revelation chapter 13. In Revelation chapter 13 comes these two beasts, is that right? One beast comes from where? From the sea. And the second beast comes from where? From the earth. And look at what these main points here that we need to be careful because we need to understand what is the problem and very soon will be the main issue for us. Let's go and see. In chapter 13, let's read verse 8 only. And it said, and all that dwell upon the earth shall what? Worship him. Who? The first beast. So we see the issue. The issue on the last controversy is what? Worship. This is what for us to know and very important to highlight. This is the first beast. And how many are going to be worshiping this beast? Here, use the expression, all the world in the sense of what? That is, almost hardly you will find a few people who won't worship. It doesn't mean 100%. It means maybe 99%. That is so high that you can say almost all. But the requirement here is said, which one are those? Whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb. Then it comes this second beast. Do you see the controversy that we saw before? Here is summarized how the devil is working. His plan is uncovered. This second beast, look at what it does. Let's read in verse 11. That's the beginning of this second beast. But look at what it said here in verse 12. And this second beast said, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell upon therein to what? To worship the beast. So you have one first beast asking for worship, and then you have a second beast asking all the peoples on the earth to what? To worship the first beast. Is the issue worship here? This is worship. Worship is the main issue. And worship, when we talk about worship, what things comes in worship? How do I worship? It's important, right? Importance, when do I worship? Do you think that's the issue? And this is what the devil has been trying to attack. The worship of God is being attacked. When did this start? Let's go to to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Let's go and read what he said, Daniel 7. Daniel 7:25. Daniel 7:25 speaks about this same power. Said, and he shall speak great words against the what? The Most High. Shall wear out the saints of the Most High. And think what? They change times and laws. And this is where this main attack of this power. Here is called the little horn. Is that right? Here in Revelation 13 is called the beast, right? And this little horn, what is going to do? try to change times and laws. Why? Because here in the laws, in the law of God, that is showing who do we need to worship. Who do we need to worship? The Creator. Was the law changed? Yes. The third commandment was abolished. And the fourth was moved to the third. And because they ended up with 9 commandments, they need to split the 10th commandment. And that's how they changed times and law. They changed the day of worship from Sabbath to Sunday. And this is what has been done. So, and is this issue until now? This issue is right now. The more you read the news, the more you go around, the tendency is to highlight Sunday instead of Sabbath. And this is what is happening. So this power is terrible. And look at what is going to read just briefly in verse 16 in Revelation 13. Because we are trying to move forward in a summary so to understand what we are going to talk today a little bit. And here said in verse 16, and he caused, mean this second beast, all, both and small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a what? A mark in the right hand or in their forehead. And that no man buy or sell, save he that hath the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And here it comes the part that is very important. In verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is a number of a man, and his number is what? 666. So, do we need understanding? Yes, we need understanding. Because in the book of Matthew, in chapter 24, when you study about what? In the time of Noah, what the Bible said about the people who was lost in the time of Noah. They did not understand until it was too late. Is that a great disappointment that God wants to save us to going through? And this is serious. Same, that's what the Bible said, as the time of Noah. It will be on these times. Because from early 1800s, the warning is being given to the world that the Lord is coming. But God continued appealing to us because we moved to chapter 14. And who do we see in chapter 14? In chapter 14, on the first few verses, we see the description of whom? The 144,000. This is the group of people who what? Who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And here comes against the last warning to the world. Is represented as what? 3 angels' message. You know, and when he gives these 3 angels' message in Revelation 14, 6, and 7, we see something peculiar here. He said what? Let's go and read it, because let's highlight only some of the points. Here said, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, verse 6, having what? The everlasting gospel to preach. But just let's keep reading. Verse 7. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment and come. And what he said here? Worship him that made heavens. So is worship an issue? Is God asking for worship? Yes. But we see that the devil is also asking for what? For worship as good, right? And when we see in this message, is the gospel needs to be given. Is the judgment part of this message? It's part of this message. Fearing God is part of this message? Yes, it is. Worship is part of this message? Yes, it is. And that's what Christianity, we need to not only us keep the holiness of the Sabbath, but this is for us also important. Because I might be worshiping, following the truth. But Jesus said, you need to worship me what? In the spirit and in truth. So do we need to worship God in the spirit? Because most of the times people worship God, you know, Sabbath hours start, but after Sabbath hours finish, what? I go back to the world. Is that worshiping God? That's not. That probably will be worshiping in truth. I keep the legalistic teaching about the hours, but my spirit is still in the world. And that's what we need to be very careful. Because Satan is using all type of deceptions. You know, and if we are not transformed and become like Jesus, being the living testimony of him, we run the risk of being deceived by the devil. Because part of this message is the same thing that is the gospel. Not only that God died on the cross for us. Not only that Jesus is willing to give us the Holy Spirit. Not only that he is calling us the sons and daughters of God. Not only that he's going to take us to heaven. But he said, I want to transform you. I need to make you a new person. All the old man needs to be gone. Anything centered on myself needs to be destroyed. I need to think like Jesus did. I only do the things that please my Father. I'm not coming to bring you new words. I am sharing what my Father gave me. When you study John 17, you can see Jesus was the pride of himself. Everything was to what? To highlight the Father, to give honor and glory to him. His teaching was his teachings. But right now you will find many Christians who said, I am not under the old law. I am under the new covenant. They said, I keep the commandments, but the ones that Jesus gave. Well, what commandments gave Jesus? If Jesus said, I don't have my own words, I am teaching you the words that my Father gave me. And people are deceived saying, I'm just keeping this new law. Love my neighbor and love God, and that's it. And they totally are falling under the deception of Satan. Or many people, they use the misunderstanding of the day of the Lord when the Bible, they misunderstood the concept on Revelation chapter 1 where it said, in the Lord's day. But if you go to the core of the commandment, on the Sabbath day in Exodus 20, they said, Sabbath, the day of the Lord. And people are using those, deceiving many people. People don't search, don't inquire about it. But this message not only states that, but it moves to verse 8, where it says what? And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is falling, the great city. So Babylon, now exists a modern Babylon. Because the old Babylon had something very peculiar. What was that? Sun worship. Remember the name of the king who started Babylon? Nimrod, right? Nimrod, one of the great-grandsons of Noah. The Bible describes as a man who stands in front of God. Means he was challenging God. Who are you? I am a great man. I have my own ideas. And he had a wife. What was his name? Semiramis. You know what happened? When Nimrod died, what was the falsehood that she brought? That she became the sun. When Nimrod died, his wife said, Nimrod became the sun, so he started what? Sun worship. That's what the Bible used Babylon. Because the sun worship that was started on that time is keeping until now. That's what the day, Sunday, is the day of the sun. This modern Babylon is falling for the same deception of Babylon. So Nimrod died. His wife said, he became the sun. Everybody needs to worship the sun. That's when sun worship started. But not only that, then Semiramis, she made the allusion that she became pregnant by the sun in a miraculous way. Of course, we know that it didn't happen like that. And then she had what? She got a son called Tammuz. And what she asked, she started asking people to worship her and the child. So that's what you see. The pictures of Semiramis is showing sitting on her lap, whom? The little child called Tammuz, right? And that's when the feminine part of worship started. Is the mother Babylon doing the same thing? The woman and the child worship? Yes. When did it start? In Babylon. And this is what is happened. Then Tammuz died. And then she started this teaching about the 40 days where they keep kind of remembering his death. Quaresma, right? Have you heard that word? The 40 days of crying for the death of Tammuz, that became a tradition. So that's why this modern Babylon is still teaching Eastern time the Quaresma. Have you heard about it? You know the Catholic Church, they do the Quaresma? What it means? Quaresma, quarter, 40 days of prayer before that. Okay? And don't be surprised that in many Christian churches, the 40 days of praying is very common. Where it comes those things? Babylon teaching. And we need to be aware of that. because those things are introduced slowly in a very subtle way to us. And we don't open our eyes very soon. When it's too late, we can feel this disappointment. But let's continue reading, because in verse 9, what it said? And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, look at again the message. What it said? If any man what? If any man worship whom? The beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, in the forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of indignation, and he shall be tormented. So and so continue the Bible verse. And look at what it said here in verse 11. And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night. What is said here? Who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receive the mark of his name. Do you see? Brett explained it yesterday what it means forever and ever. You know, this is a verse misunderstood. He explained very well the principle about health, but this is what is going to happen. The issue on these last times is, who do I worship? When you wake up every Monday, Sunday to Monday, who do you worship? Do I worship my family? Do I worship my work? Do I worship my plans, my ideas? Or do I worship God? Who is first in my mind? Do I worship my body? Whatever it is, we need to be careful, because worship is going to be issue on the last days. And that's, as you see the warnings is giving here, what is the conclusion? The conclusion of this comes right in verse 12. What is said here? Here is the passion of the saints. Here are they that what? That keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. So one group is going to be destroyed. The last warning is being given, and then what happened? Declare who are the ones who are going to be saved. Do you see? Is there any more time here? After that, there is no more time. In these Bible verses that we in summary presented, is there anything about purgatory here? No, there is no purgatory. Is the warning is given to the world? What then? Then it comes distraction from God. Do we see here anything about rapture? That people is taken and some people stay alive, and then after 7 years comes again. There is anything like that? There is nothing like that. Because then go to the chapter 15 and look at what it said. Because this is what all of us, we need to be looking at. In Revelation 15, and I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. Verse 2, this is the one that I want to concentrate. And I saw as it were a sea of glass, mingled with fire, and them that gotten the victory over what? Over the beast, over his image, over his mark, over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. This is where we need to be. See, only those people from Revelation 14:12, the ones who do not worship. And it's very clear, the verse. Neither the beast, neither the image, neither the mark, nor on the hand, nor on the forehead. And this is important for us to know. So the issue is worship. Sometimes we tend to, and many people accuse us from being legalistics, but the legalism comes when we try to keep the commandments of God, but we are separated from the testimony of Jesus. We think that the testimony of Jesus is only for Sabbath day, but we forgot the testimony